Y'all asked for backup. I didn't want to just do backup in isolation because that can often lead to a situation of complete garbage going in and then garbage coming back out. And if there's one thing that I've discovered over time is that when you have a massive backup, that is not the time when you want to sort out what you have. You want to sort it out and send it back in. So a fair amount of the first half is going to be about organization and managing a large body of images. It breaks it down into a few discrete steps. So let me see if I can get started with that here. Scroll up there. Okay, so we had this old school film workflow. Workflow is not a digital thing. It's been around for a long time. You'd have to edit your film. Let us say cut negatives into 5 or 6 sheets, depending on how you're filing. They had to be managed in different sizes. So 35mm was filed one way, 2 1/4 filed another way. People who shot 4x5 had even more challenges. My own approach to it was to file negatives and slides into appropriate sleeves, but I kept them separate because the way that I cross-referenced them was fundamentally different. I'd cross-reference negatives against their proof sheets, and I would label slides with it was actually the first app I ever bought. There was a thing called Craddock Caption Writer, and it printed out caption information on tiny little labels you could actually stick onto the slides itself. And that was actually the first introduction I had to the idea of metadata, which of course we didn't call it, and we call them labels on slides. So moved on from there, we had all these different formats to wrangle. And we had them in this kind of rough idea of the relative sizes of them. The little tiny one inside there is APS film, which was a very short-lived miniature format that came out, quite a bit smaller than full-frame 35. And of course, as the film sizes got bigger, the challenges of keeping them safe, of course, amplified as well. So that's kind of what my darkroom used to look like. It's now a massive storeroom. Those enlargers have gone nowhere because nobody wants to buy enlargers. The negatives were filed in this system where they go into a sheet. I use glassine because I discovered and Noel Norton verified that plastic stuck to plastic in the humid conditions we had here, and that welded the two together. Whereas glassine, you could float it off. You could soak it and it would float off the negative. So that was the worst case scenario of your stash getting damp or soaked in water for some reason or another. So the tieback number on the sheet would tie back to the contact sheet. The contact sheet would get filed into an envelope which carried information, again, the idea of metadata, information about information. And that will get filed into an alphabetical collection of contact sheets. I have to say that this process actually still works today, because as long as I know what I'm looking for, I can find the contact sheet. If I can find the contact sheet, I can find the negative. And that's how I'm able to navigate what would otherwise be a really quite insane collection of film. Slides looked a bit like this. That was the generated metadata there. That was ostensibly for people who were licensing slides for various uses so they would know what they're looking at. But that little code number there tied back to a database that I would be able to reference deeper information about it. So we talk about workflow, and it's probably a good idea to think about why we want a workflow. A workflow is an opportunity to consolidate work, to really look at it as a large body of work and begin slicing and dicing it into forms that you can manage. It's a way to organize and identify work. The worst thing you can do shooting something flush with excitement about it is to think that in 3 years you're going to remember anything about it at all. So taking a note of stuff, being able to reference actual information about what you shot, and more compellingly, to be able to pass that information in a substantial way on to others is a critical part of that workflow organization system. It's an opportunity to back up, to copy to different media so that you have multiple instances of digital files. It's also an opportunity to verify. We have situations sometimes where we have a full hard drive. It's maybe a 2 terabyte or 4 terabyte drive, and we're moving that to an 8 terabyte drive. There are tools that you can use now that will verify that you've done a successful copy job. And finally, of course, the purpose of any workflow or database system is, I thought I let Nadine in before. She leave when she come back. She circle back. Is to recover, to be able to find this stuff. It's really important that any system you put in place is not orderliness for the sake of seeming orderly and impressing people who like tidiness, but being able to meaningfully access, collate, and organize the work that you have. So today's workflow steps have a slightly different set of terminologies associated with them. I break them up into these areas. There's ingestion, browsing, parametric image editing, final image editing using a tool like Photoshop. Doesn't have to be Photoshop. There's lots of other tools that do similar things. Backup, and of course, catalog referencing, which is this really weird area of the business that doesn't get enough love, so that the software for it is kind of meager. So the first step is ingestion. Ingestion is the fancy term for a copy the thing to the hard drive. So it's first transferred from the media card. There's a process that you should follow for yourself, because after all, yes, you might need to turn this collection over to somebody someday and they need to make sense of it. But first of all, you should be able to make sense of it. So a standard for folder creation, one that is sustainable and gives you basic information about what you've dropped in the folder, is a good idea. This is the point at which you make sure there's a second copy before you wipe the media card. Formatting a media card is generally considered good housekeeping after a bit. For the same reason that reformatting a hard drive tidies up various things with bad sectors and so on, the same thing happens with the flash media that we use in cameras. So I'll probably shoot maybe for a couple of weeks with a card, then I'll make sure I've copied everything off and backed it up, then I'll completely reformat it. And that's somebody coming in there. My goodness, I'm getting good at this. And I'm saying that, and I know it's going to crash. Ingestion. So why ingestion? Why this term? It's a term that refers to swallowing without chewing. And it came into common use with the early U-matic and VHS tapes that were being used professionally for video. And they had these huge machines that would like suck down the tape when they were copying material off of them for editing. Just for reference, that's kind of what it looked like. And it actually had an audible thunk. It was a physical thing. You could actually feel the desk vibrate. It sort of suck it down, so ingestion came out of that process. So here is a typical image folder for me. As you can see, what I preach I don't always follow. I kind of know which are the ones that I'm doing what with. But generally speaking, I'll have a basic name for what's in the folder and the date it was shot. Those are my two parameters for any folder with a collection of images. I may have subfolders inside there, but I'll usually keep that information at the point of folder and image very spare. And we'll get into why that is in a bit. So when we're dealing with, there are tools, of course, that manage ingestion as well, but of course, it's built into something like Lightroom. These arrows sort of show you where ingested files go. So you designate a basic place that you want the thing to copy it to, and at the same time, it can make a second copy somewhere else, which should not be on the same hard drive you copied the same thing on. So it's usually a good idea to have at least 2 drives running if you're going to do auto copying when you're doing ingestion. And you can apply form, metadata, and keywords at this point. I'll get into why these are important in a bit, but I want to kind of build the ideas that we're talking about here as we go along. So that's Lightroom ingestion automation. So our next step usually is preview browsing. Now, it's possible to do all this in something like Lightroom or any other parametric image editor like that. I find it tedious, however. Browsers are a class of software that are designed to very quickly render a decent image out of raw files. They do a lickety-split job with JPEGs, but things like Photomechanic, Adobe Bridge is really slow compared to the others. On One Photo Raw is fair. Exposure X is a surprise. It's really a fast browser, even though it was really meant to be a kind of special effects tool. And as a result of that, they began developing it as a browser. So what do I use a browser for? I use it for if a client is looking at pictures as I'm going along. It's a quick way for them to see exactly what's happening and get a sense of how the shoot is going along. I'll sometimes say, hey, you look great here. Maybe we should do some more of something like that. Browsers tend to use the embedded JPEG in a raw file. As such, they are useless for critical review. They're not sharp enough. They're not color correct enough. They represent an image in the same half-baked state as the raw file, but it's a good way to just very quickly see what you're doing. This is also the point where, and there's kind of a divided opinion about this, whether you should keep all your pictures. I have no interest in looking at some pictures more than once. So if I have 5 pictures and 3 of them are sucky, I'm going to dump them. So this is the point at which I mark them to get rid of them, cut the overall size of the shoot down a bit so that it becomes more manageable. So I'm going to take you through something called blood donation, which is a thing that I did. I might as well make this fill the screen here because it makes more sense that way. So this is Adobe Bridge 2020. Even though Adobe Bridge is not the best of browsers, it has a dramatic advantage over the others. It is free. Even if you do not subscribe to anything else from Adobe, you can sign up at Adobe and get a copy of Adobe Bridge for free. It's basically their first Zoosh. They want you to go like, ooh, this is kind of nice and this is free, so I'm going to subscribe. So this is the first hit. This is your first chance to say, ooh, this is an Adobe thing. That is why everybody's so excited about it. It's a capable browser. It was the first of the major browsers to come along. As such, it is functional. It is limited by the fact that it is not optimized for pictures. It is in fact optimized for everything that Adobe creates, which is an insane number of apps that cover audio, film, and so on. So as such, it handles pictures well, but it isn't actually designed for that alone. Photomechanic. Photomechanic is a little pricey for just a browser. Photomechanic's 2 superpowers are that it is the fastest browser, full stop. It will draw a folder full of images while the others are still gasping. The other thing it has is it has metadata superpowers, which most people don't need. But I'll give you a for instance of how something like Photomechanic soars. You have 10 photographers shooting a football game. Photomechanic can look at the camera ID and assign metadata specifically for that photographer to images as they are being ingested. So it's a big deal with people who deal with vast quantities of images. So they do good business with folks like that. On One Photo Raw, it's up to 2020 now. They're a very excitable group. They have a decent browser, but they also have all these other special effects filters that they've thrown into it. They don't quite know whether they want to be a plugin or a browser with additional tools. So it's kind of in a weird state of development right now. But they revise every year, so it's hard to say what's going to happen with that. Exposure X5, they started with X, X2, X3, and so I jumped on at X3 when I did a trial with it and was astonished at how fast it rendered files. My other big break even for whether I'm going to work with a browser at all is how well it reads digital negative files. I shoot a lot of smartphone pictures in RAW, which of course are camera produced DNG files, and a surprising number of apps and browsers do not know how to read them. So if it can't read my smartphone pictures, it can't read my entire collection, so it gets bumped. Exposure can. So it's kind of smart that way. All right, our next class of app is the parametric image editor. This is what most people tend to use these days. I remember life before parametric image editors, so I understand why they're so popular. When I started shooting raw files in 2005, 2006, the way that you dealt with a folder full of raw files is you opened each one and saved it. There was no automation. So if you shot 200 pictures, you had to work your way through 200 pictures one by one. Parametric image editors did a jump around that. What they do is they don't touch the raw file. They store information about everything you do to the picture while drawing a preview that updates according to the changes that you make. But it stores it as metrics, as information, as data that travels along with the files in something known as a sidecar file. If you've ever worked on a picture using a parametric image editor like Lightroom and saw that it generated an XML file, that's where the information is going. Alternatively, it may put it in a database, but it's generally considered good form to keep the XML file with the pictures so that whichever place you open them, it will carry all that information with it. The metrics are applied to the file when you export. So the changes don't apply until you say, okay, I want to send this out as a TIFF, I want to send this out as a JPEG. Parametric image editors are designed to do a lot of, not a lot of things, but a fair number of things to a lot of photos at the same time. Among the things they can do is you can insert metadata into a whole graph of files at the same time. If you shot, for instance, and this has happened to me sometimes, I shoot 200 pictures of someone in exactly the same situation with only a change of clothing in the same backdrop with the same lighting. Yes, it's dull, but sometimes it happens like that. And I decide I want to make a really nice, clean preview of all of this for a gallery for the client. I just fix one picture. I do all the metrics for one, and I apply those metrics to the other 199 pictures. And it takes like 2 minutes, less than that, to apply all of this stuff. So it's a great tool for that sort of thing. Examples of parametric image editors are Lightroom, of course, Capture One, which has a well-deserved reputation for the quality of its transforms. Capture One was transforming raw files long before Photoshop even had a plugin. Aftershot Pro, which was once a great app called Bibble. It was an app that was created, first of all, to deal with Canon raw files. Corel brought it, and Aftershot Pro is like many apps that Corel bought in a slow process of dying through neglect. DxO Photolab is an interesting tool that came out of a optics correction tool that they had when they realized the browser market was kind of getting kicked open. And they started building a lot of stuff into that. They bought the assets of the Nick collection from Google that Google didn't want. All Google really wanted was Snapseed. After they had Snapseed, all the rest of the stuff was just excess. So they offloaded that to DxO, and DxO has been developing it ever since. So my own workflow approach to this is that most of my broad edits are completed here. When a picture has been through a parametric image editor with me, or a group of pictures, it's about 80% of the way to being complete. Sometimes, depending on the thing that I'm doing, I'll just output the stuff directly from there. Most normally, though, I will generate a gallery for a client to look at. They'll choose the pictures they want me to do final work on, and they select the finals, and I do additional work on it at that point moving forward. Okay, Aftershot Pro. Now, I've been trying to show you all this stuff with the same group of pictures. Some pictures I shot of myself giving blood 9 years ago. And Corel Aftershot cannot render the files. They are Adobe created DNG files, and it just simply doesn't know what they are. So again, Corel, thanks so much for taking a great app and shooting it in the back of the head. Capture 120. I've mentioned to people in the past that I have no intention of buying the subscription model of either Photoshop or Lightroom. I have a whole thing with Adobe going back years now. They were once this great company and they continue to make great software, but they picked every option they could to become annoying and painful. So that's Capture One's interface there. This is DxO. DxO is famous in the photography business for the extensive testing of lenses on cameras. So a new lens or a new camera comes out and they have this extensive testing suite they put it through and they rank it against others. So for pixel peepers, people who are really obsessed with, is this absolutely the sharpest lens I could get? DxO is absolutely crack cocaine. It's the place to go to get that kind of information. A byproduct of that is they have all this information about cameras and lenses. So when you use DxO Photolab, you can download these optics modules for the specific lens you have and the specific camera you have. And DxO knows how to correct for it because they've examined the optics so thoroughly. So it's a nifty tool for some kinds of things. It also doesn't read camera-generated DNG files, so they gotta wait on me with that one. I've mentioned metadata before, ever since the days of film and so on. There are different kinds of metadata. There are basically two kinds of metadata. There's Exif Metadata, which is the metadata that is generated by the camera and written into the file itself. That's information like the date, the time, whether or not the flash went off. There's a whole string band set of information that goes into Exif. Then there is user-created metadata. And user-created metadata includes identifier, who you are, where you can be found, captioning. All that falls under the International Press Transmission Council, which is an organization that oversees metadata and file transmission protocols and so on. What happened was that when digital photography came along, the IPTC, who were responsible for handling file transmission in the days when that was basically a big fax machine. It was a remarkable thing. The thing was the size of a deep freeze. I know it's because I've seen it at the Guardian and the Express. It was the size of a deep freeze. It spit out this paper that was even flimsier than fax paper and would turn brown and turn to like powder within a week. So they were kind of guaranteeing that you couldn't archive or keep the pictures that came off of the AP or the Reuters wires. And it cost a lot because it was traveling through textile. So everybody was paying for this thing to be transmitted on what was basically a really big fax. So every inch of it was expensive. So what the IPTC came into its own for was to create a strip about an inch wide, right at the bottom of each picture, which packed all the information about the picture that you could possibly ever need to know. Where it was shot, who shot it, who was the licensor, how to contact people, and so on. All that was this little tiny strip. When it became clear that people were transmitting pictures using satellite phones, sending 128K pictures over sat phones and taking half an hour to an hour to transmit it, they said, hey, look, this thing is not going to work if the picture goes one way and the caption goes the next way. So they went to Adobe, who were designing Photoshop at the time. They went to a company called Aldus, who had developed a protocol called TIFF, which is still to this day one of the best formats for saving and archiving image data. RAW files are actually a kind of TIFF. and the Joint Picture Experts Group, who you might know from the term JPEG, and said, hey, look, these files that you're creating, we want some space inside them to leave information. And that was the beginning of IPTC captioning. It started very simple, just very basic information. Over the years, it's expanded, but they've managed to keep the protocol fairly straightforward so that even pictures with IPTC information that were shot 20 years ago can still be read in today's apps. But IPTC is bigger now. You can store information about medical scans. You can store geographic and mapping information in it. There's special subsections of it for that. So that's IPTC information. Keywording, and I usually suggest people that they think about a taxonomy. Think of keywording as branching words. So place, Port of Spain, street, if it's relevant, or building, if it's relevant, and branching it down from there. Because the key to successful keywording is to think of how you're going to look for the picture. You're not going to look for the picture as pretty sunset. You're going to look for the picture based on where you shot it, what the subject was, who might have been in the picture. All of these are bits of information that are in keywording that will help you to find pictures. If you really keyword well, you can very often find pictures. And I know this because for the last 5 or 6 years, that's what I've done. Is someone trying to say something? Oh, okay. For the last 5 or 6 years, what I've done is I use a couple of search tools on the Mac and the equivalent tools on the PC that will search inside of pictures for keyword information. So I will just type in the things that I know I'm looking for, and the find tools will search the text and find it. It doesn't know what the picture is. It can't tell anything about the picture, but it can find the raw text and point me to a list of pictures, and I can very easily winnow that down from there. So I consider keywording to be one of the most critical things about metadata, apart from putting your personal information in there. Then there is grading metadata. Flags, colors, and stars. I don't use colors, I use flags and stars. Those are critical for sorting and organizing images, and stars are the most critical one of them. And let me give you a little bit of information about that. So yeah, metadata file names are a really bad way to identify images. Before it became easy to put metadata into pictures, we used to have file names like Doubles Vendor, Charlotte Street, 6 a.m., and try to cram all of this into 32 characters. And of course, you ended up with these incomprehensible things that nobody could read. When you embed that, and the space to put information in the picture is really ridiculous. You can put an essay inside a picture and it makes no difference to the file size. So it's a rich resource for information about images. The data, of course, travels with the picture, and almost all software can read some level of embedded metadata. One of the things that's interesting about that is that even Windows Explorer and the Macintosh Finder, if you do a get info or properties on it, it will show you some of the metadata information right there in properties or get info. So when I import, I consider this information here to be the most critical stuff that needs to go in. I have a metadata template. That template gets updated once a year. It has my basic information about how to find me. It travels everywhere with pictures that I send out. Anybody who knows anything about photography can find it. So don't lie and tell me that you didn't know how to find me. This is that same IPTC information generated from Lightroom showing up in photo mechanics, rather robust metadata systems. So on import, I will usually have my metadata template here. It's very basic. It's nothing to do with the picture I'm making and everything to do with the information I want to embed as a baseline with all the pictures that I make. The keywords are very subject specific. So that's what a metadata template looks like. Once you set this up, you can very easily just change the year and do a save as and save it. So I have them going back, I think, till 2009 or something like that. So yeah, so these are keywords embedded here into this as I import it. And I'll choose keywords. If I'm going to look at this picture, I knew I shot these pictures for BitDev, my column on technology. I know I did it as a donation. I don't know what hospitality is doing here. All my keywording is not perfect. It's got to do with health. It's got to do with a mobile thing that came. I know I always put the place that I shot it. That can be a big deal because if you're looking pictures from Tobago and they have very similar keywording to pictures that you shot in Trinidad, that's a big separator right there. Rendering previews, right. So this is one way that you can look at files in Lightroom. I do not look at files like this at all. I hide all the side panels, and this is how I tend to go through pictures in Lightroom. So you'll see that they came in with the camera generated names here. That usually lasts for about 3 minutes. I have a file renaming template. Templates are great. Templates are awesome. Templates are, I don't have to type this again and again and again and again. So you set up a template once and you let the computer do what it does. I say this with a significant amount of relief because I used to have to rename pictures one by one on a computer with a typewriter and a keyboard. Well, a keyboard and it was horrible. My file naming template is based on my initials, the date, and I always put year first because that helps with the filing. And the original number suffix is the number that's assigned by the camera. Using a system like this, you eliminate one of the problems of file renaming, which is file collisions, which happens when two files end up having the same name. With this system, for me to have two pictures that have the same file name, I've got to shoot more than 9,999 pictures in one day. Even at Carnival, that has never happened. So it's proven so far, knock on wood, to be a pretty robust way of organizing stuff. Okay, so once I've done my go through and I've done the first thing I'll usually do is I'll do rejects. So pictures I never want to see again. So I use black flag for that in Lightroom. And I usually look at just the black flag images one more time. And once I'm satisfied that, no, I don't care, they get deleted. I use compare a lot, the N key, to look at pictures when I'm narrowing it down. And the really cool thing about Lightroom and most of these editors now is that you can just tap a picture and you decide, nah, not that one. And everything else gets bigger until you get down to the one or two pictures that you're really interested in. So this is a compare. I'm looking at one and the other one. I am a blood donor, by the way. I got a little trophy from Zalia Hassan Ali for that. And I've decided this is the picture I'm going to work with here. So it's been file renamed. It's got a flag and it's got stars. Why does it have both? It has both because flags are not something that all image browsers and parametric image editors support. But stars show up everywhere. Stars show up in properties. It show up in the Windows properties. They show up everywhere. Everything sees stars. You have 5 stars available to you. You want to control your ego about your pictures. The ideal recipe for working with stars is to work with the first 2. I'll tell you why. You have 5 stars. You're working through your pictures, 1 star, 2 star. Sometimes I'll bounce as high as 3 stars if I'm really having a hard time choosing. But always when I'm done, I bounce everything down to 1 or 2 stars. Why is that? At the end of the year, you say, hey, I want to look at all my 2-star pictures because those were really my best, and I want to decide what I'm going to do a gallery with on the website, what I'm going to write about on a blog post, and so on. So when you go through all those 2-star pictures, of course, there's way too many pictures. How do you elevate the best of the best for the year? Well, that's when you go to 3 stars. And so on and so forth. So by the time you reach the end of your career and you're doing your grand retrospective for the Museum of Modern Art, that's when you say, yeah, this can be the time for the 5-star pics, which are going to cull from the 4-star pics. And you may occasionally look at a couple of 2- and 3-star pics. My final step in Lightroom is to do some detailed work in the develop module. For those of you who are not totally familiar with Photoshop, I'll just mention that the raw engine in Lightroom is identical to the raw engine in Photoshop. So they support each other. I mean, if you do raw transforms here and you open the file in Photoshop, it will automatically plug all the values that you have in because it reads the same metrics. So this is a compare. This is before develop toning. This is after develop toning. And then I will export. I have a few different presets here, basically about 2 or 3 of them. And I send them out in what's called high-bit format. These are 16-bit TIFFs, which are as close as you can get in a generally readable format to the original RAW file itself. RAW files tend to be 14 or 16-bit image files. So sending it out as a 16-bit image means that I capture as much as possible of the original tonal range that the image started off with. My last step after I'm done, and of course it's the next slide right after, but this actually tends to happen weeks or months afterwards. My last step when I'm saying, okay, I'm done with these pictures, I'm not going to be working with this in any significant way in the future, it's time to archive this, I convert to digital negative format, DNG files. This is one of those things where, you hate Adobe, but wow, the product, this makes sense. A DNG file is a kind of overall file wrapper that handles all the things that you've done with the file and puts it in a format that is very accessible. This came about because I think I have something about DNGs here. Why DNG? Yes. Okay. So why DNG? It's an open code base. Every RAW file that a camera manufacturer generates, whether it's Hasselblad's 3F something, CR2 from Canon, NEF from Nikon, ORF from Olympus, they've got their own secret special sauce inside there and they don't want to share it with anybody. The way that these RAW programs work is that they buy the camera, they generate the file, and then they reverse engineer the file. The quality of the image that you get from the RAW decoder is testament to how well they're able to do that. But there's some stuff they can't get into. DNG attempts to create a file that can unwrap itself. So it's got an embedded codec that tells anything that knows how to read a DNG file, this is how you open it. For that reason, DNG files are generally openable by either Mac or Windows systems without any software at all. It's an open system, so anybody can go to Adobe's website and download the documentation and make a DNG unwrap app. So it packages all the things that are sometimes strewn all about the XML files, all that stuff. You can even embed a whole copy of the RAW file in it as well. And it packages it into one file with the unwrap code information in it. This came about because very early cameras that were in use, say around maybe about 95, 96, the first digital cameras that were shooting whopping 1.4 megapixel files, had a RAW option, and there was no way to open them because the unwrap code wasn't available to anyone. So this was a way of avoiding that in the future. New people are coming out with new apps and so on, are not necessarily going to figure out how to unwrap a RAW file from an Olympus camera that was taking pictures in 2000. They'll go like, yeah, we ain't bothering with that. But if you have those files, of course, you can't get into them anymore. The other magic thing that they do is that because so much of their information is actually embedded in the file, they embed a hash that lets you know that this is what the file is supposed to look like. Now, let's say you copy 2,000 or 3,000 or maybe 20,000 pictures from one hard drive to another. How do you know that all the pictures copied properly? The only way you could probably do it is randomly opening pictures and so on. But there are there are image verification tools that you can get that will do the equivalent of opening every single file, and they'll do it in the background to verify that every file copied successfully. And you might think that's a bit of overkill, but if you're a museum who is capturing important pictures in RAW format and you are migrating images from one system to another, yeah, you're going to want to verify those images as you go along. Okay, so this is an example of what I'm talking about DNG. This is Adobe RAW CS3. So Adobe RAW CS3 came out before the camera that shot these RAW files. So it does not know what to do with them. It does not have the unwrap code for this. Adobe CS4 does, but if you have Adobe CS3, you are out of luck. But if you do run them through the DNG converter, you suddenly get these files that can be opened. The DNG converter is a thing that Adobe makes for free. They have it on their website. It's actually very elegant. I can't believe I'm singing so many praises about this company that annoys me so much. You drop a folder or a folder with subfolders here, and you tell it where you want to save the files. It could be a whole other hard drive. And it just churns away, turning all the raw files into DNG files. I once left this running for about 3 days to do a batch convert. And what's really cool is that it replicated the folder hierarchy exactly. So a really useful and well-coded tool. Image editor. Photoshop is the standard. It's designed to do many things with a single image. So you can buy plugins, you can buy the extended version of, well, sorry, not buy. You can license through subscription a copy of Photoshop that does a great many things for medical purposes and so on. Best practice. It's usually considered to be a good idea to use as many of Photoshop's non-destructive edits as possible. Disclosure, I don't care. Once I'm done working on a picture, I'm done with it. I'm not coming back to it. So I hardly ever use non-destructive edits. Plus, I have really bad habits from using Photoshop since version 1. But I can tell you an example that I know of when somebody made very good use of these non-destructive edits. Landscape photographer does a magnificent photograph, does a limited edition of 10 30 by 40 prints, sends that out there into the world. It sells well, but of course these things take a while at that price. So about 3 or 4 years later, the edition is done. But people who don't have quite as much money are saying, well, you know, we'd really like an edition in 11 by 14. So it's like 3 or 4 years later. Guy is not using the same version of Photoshop. Guy is not using the same computer. Guy is not using the same monitor. Guy is not even using the same printer. So he literally cannot replicate what he did before, except, of course, that he can, because he has a master Photoshop file with all of his edit layers in place. And he has a master print, which he's marked up and said, okay, these are the things that I did and so on. So he can then reopen that file, make any transforms that he needs to make in order to align stuff with his new regime and system. He may even improve it slightly. And then, of course, proceed to do his new edition. The exact number of times this has happened to me is 0. So while I know that it's a good thing to do it, and you know, if you intend to come back to pictures and work on them, non-destructive edits are great. To me, they just make for great big bloated PSD files that I've got no use for. But that's just me. Again, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, not because I expect you to do a lot of stuff, but because there are so many options, everybody should have a chance to pick their way through what they're doing and decide, okay, this makes sense for me, that other thing doesn't make sense for me, and so on. Of course, if you're using non-destructive edits, you'd want to save in the PSD file format. That preserves all of those edits and so on in a form that you can reopen later on. If you're working with really big files, there's a special version of the format called PSB, which basically stands for Photoshop Big. Adobe is not brilliant with their naming. I have spent some time investigating options for not using Photoshop anymore. It hasn't been wildly successful, but these are a couple of the tools that I actually liked. Affinity Photo is the closest you're going to come to something that looks, feels, and works like Photoshop. It's actually hovering on the edge of copyright infringement. It's a bit slower for reasons that I can't understand. It's only recently begun allowing some Photoshop plugins to work. But it has the undeniable appeal of costing $50 US. So for that price, you get an awful lot. And it works, the machine learning, the muscle memory that you have from working with Photoshop will translate almost exactly into the way that Affinity Photo works. Luminar. This is Luminar 2018. They're up to Luminar 4 now, which is 2 revisions after this. I really like Luminar. Luminar is really fast, but Luminar is an image editor for people who have just started image editing, because all the things that it does make perfect sense if you're coming into image editing from all the different channels that are available today. I constantly bounce my head with Luminar because it does almost nothing like Photoshop does. So I'll be constantly looking for, okay, how do I do this again? Oh wait, no, I have to go here and do this here. But if you start with something like Luminar, it's really quite easy to get going and really quite a remarkable tool. All right, so that's my final stuff on this in Photoshop. And when I get to this stage, I'll do my key edits in 16-bit format, which include fine tone and color edits. I use feathered selections for local adjustments. I was a darkroom man for about 20 years. Interesting aside, I have a very good friend, Peter Shim, who is a fine artist. And when he uses Photoshop, he's all selections and brushes, and he does the same things that I do, but using an entirely different suite of tools because he comes at it from his understanding. I come from the point of view of waving stuff around and then enlarger, and waving my hand around and stuff to apply tonal adjustments. So I do that sort of thing with feathered selections, and it works for me. I apply sharpening. I have a automated, one of those automated things that apply sharpening, and I usually save as JPEG TIFF. I usually give clients a copy of JPEG and TIFF, reason being that the artists will want the TIFF, but they can't open it. So I had enough of those conversations with people to know that I just say, you see the folder named TIFF? The pictures for you are inside there. If you want them for a little newsletter and thing that you send it out via email, use those. So that's a finished picture there. And catalog reference. This is the final class of images that you might want to consider. Catalogs build an offline reference with thumbnails and data in their own database. In a perfect world, a catalog software tool allows you to do work on the pictures without the pictures being around. So let's say that we did not have the situation that we're in, and you were going off to China and you were on a 14-hour flight and you were able to plug in your laptop, but you didn't want to walk with all your pictures, but you wanted to put in keywording and metadata and so on. A proper catalog tool allows you to do that without having the pictures by entering the information in the database. And then when you return home, you can push that information back out to the original files. So they can reference images that are not directly available, and they usually allow a fair number of changes to metadata. So this was a really good tool somewhere around 1993. It was a tool called Extensys Portfolio. It worked really well, but it's the nature of this category of tools that there's 2 people who need them. QAts like me, and big Sawatis like Boeing. Boeing needs something to archive all their pictures and so on and sort it out. So people very wisely realized that only a few people like me were actually buying it because we were getting down to this stage of the organization of the pictures thing. But people like Boeing were willing to throw millions of dollars at tools like this. So a whole new category came about called asset managers, digital asset managers. And Portfolio decided, you see they're selling software for $50 and $60? Nah, we're going to do a web thing. And so they're still in existence, but you can't buy their products. Well, you can if you have a bottomless resource of money. That's created a gap for some things like, this is Mylio, which wants to gather all your pictures into a cloud database and make it available to you on your computer, on your phone, on your tablet. It basically wants to be Apple Photos with a little more muscle. It's the thing that it wants to do and the people it wants to do it for, they're not going to want to pay for this. So this is kind of doomed. This is Media One Pro. Media One Pro is now owned by Phase One, the people who created Capture One. Media One is probably the best single seat catalog tool available today. It's beginning to be overtaken by some of the functions of things like Lightroom and some of the other tools. But as a cataloging tool, it's about the best thing there is. It started off as something called iView Multimedia. Then Microsoft bought it and called it Expression Media for a while before it got picked up by Phase One. It's really remarkable to me that such a promising product simply can't find a market. But Phase One is happy to carry it along because they marry it with Capture One to do interesting things. This is AC/DC. This is the Mac version of AC/DC. The Mac version is terrible, but the version for Windows apparently is really good and gives Media One Pro a run for its money in terms of asset management. I know a couple of companies in Trinidad who manage a moderately hefty collection of pictures with this and can find stuff using its metadata tools and so on. So it's a decent one. Canto was also a standalone, Canto Cumulus was also a standalone product that I think still has a standalone product, but I can't find anywhere that you can actually buy it. They too have gone after the big asset management market with big companies. Okay, so that's software. I want to introduce you to something that's both software and hardware. And this really gets down into my idea that if you have a workflow that has discrete steps, it means that you don't have to do everything right away. It's part of a process of organizing and sorting out your pictures as you go along. And one of them should be embedding profiles into the images that have lasting value. So calibration. Calibration is a process that seeks to create a closed loop between your camera, your computer screen, your computer imaging device, which would be including the video card and all of that, because that screen affects color, your printer, and a lasting embedded description of the color in the file that will serve you in good stead further on. So calibration is all about the development of what are called profiles. Profiles are descriptors that say, this is what this picture looks like. And profiles exist for images. Profiles exist for screens, which are a combination of the computing video card and the camera, and the screen that they're displayed on. So you calibrate screens. Printers. If you buy a printer, you'll usually see that there are options for choosing different profiles. And if you buy a nice printer like an upscale Canon or an upscale Epson and so on, but you want to use an off-brand paper, you'll usually discover that you have your best experiences if you go to the website of the off-brand paper, Moab, Hahnemühle, and you find the profile which they have, at some expense, created for you for the specific printer you have. That gives you a good starting point for quality printing across a range of devices. One of the key things that calibration does, though, is it manages something called gamut reduction. how to explain gamut reduction. Gamut reduction is you take a picture in the world of this wonderful, beautiful thing. And it's got all these great colors and tones and mood and so on. It's a wonderful thing. And then it goes on the sensor, and even if you shoot a RAW file, you're cutting down everything that you saw into what the sensor can capture. Then you put it on a computer screen, unless you have an incredibly expensive ISO or one of those huge 16-bit screens that does really great color rendering. What you see on the screen is going to be a cut-down version of what's in the file. And then you go to print it. If you print on a really good color printer, it's going to cut it down a bit more if you go to printing in a magazine or a newspapers. By the time you get to a newspaper, this wonderful scene that you shot that had this great vista of color in it is down to like a little keyhole. You're kind of looking through this tiny thing, and it's picking and choosing the colors it can do to try to reproduce what the original thing looked like. So calibration helps the process by displaying what the screen can display, sending to the printer what the printer can print, and so on, so that it makes the best use of the color that's available within the range of what the device can display or print. So the other thing that a proper profile does is that if you do color toning and correction on your picture and it goes to somebody else's screen, you run the risk that it will look completely different on their screen. A good profile will tell that computer, that video card, and that screen, this is what this is supposed to look like, and instruct it accordingly. We're in a nice time now because a lot of browsers are supporting profiles as well. They don't support the big fancy profiles. They don't support fancy profiles at all. The major profiles that you will see are Adobe RGB, Photo RGB, which is a big wide gamut profile. It's the one that captures a lot of what's in the raw capture space. And sRGB, which is like the doubles of color profiles. Almost everything can read an sRGB profile and give you a reasonable approximation of what the picture is supposed to look like. So I normally send out my pictures. I work in Photo or Adobe RGB, but when I send pictures out, I send them out in sRGB because I know it's going to be 90% of what's there. So we're closing this loop between screens, printers, and so on, and of course, ancillary use and other people making use of them. Color gamut, this is what that actually looks like. If the visible spectrum is this whole big color chart here, white gamut RGB is the yellow bounding box inside here. Adobe RGB is the white one. sRGB is the little black one here. And by the time you get down to the highest standard for color printing, which is like top of the line glossy color printing, you're down to this little blue box inside here. So again, this is my metaphor for the keyhole. It keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You want the best colors to go through, and that's what profiles enable. So profiling can be done one of two ways. It's highly recommended that if you're doing a lot of serious work that's color dependent, that you get a color profiler. This is the one I use. It's becoming quite old and out of date now, but it still works. It's a thing that you attach to the screen, and it runs a whole set of tests and so on and profiles the monitor. It saves it as a profile. You usually have to do it every 6 months to allow for color drift, because monitors don't see the same colors. They age, the color tends to drift and shift slightly. So it does something that looks like this. You see all the colors flashing and so on. It does computery things. You don't have to bother your head. When it's done, it says done. If you don't have a calibrator, that doesn't mean that you're out of luck. Apple has a calibrator tool in its software. The Apple tool requires you to kind of squint a bit, but basically what you're trying to do is align this and align this until this apple disappears. It works fairly well. If you have good color sight, you can get this as much as 80, so between 70 and 80% of what a calibrator will do, which is a whole lot better than nothing. Windows, of course, also has a similar system, and squinting also helps here. It leads you through step by step by step by step until you get to where you need to be. One of the things that I've made that I found useful for this is that I usually just fill the whole back of the screen with what I call an objective color chart. I make these squares, these long rectangles on the screen, and I fill them with first red, green, blue, then cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So I fade from 100% to 0. And when I'm done, it looks like that. And it gives me a sense of, because things you photograph have tints and tones to them and your eye sees and corrects for them, but this is totally objective. This is like, this is black, this is gray, and it's really a way of just sort of nailing down exactly what the screen is supposed to look like. Okay, so image completion. Finishing an image is a concept that's as old as photography itself. I know young people like to talk about, yeah, straight out a camera, yeah. You know what? When it was a real catch-tail to fix pictures that you shot, we went after it because there's an idea that you can really realize fully everything that you photographed and leap over the limitations of the equipment, the tools that you have, and so on. So one of the interesting things that's come up as a result of that, of the digital age, is that modern retouching and tuning are no longer limited by time. So there is a tendency towards excess. When you're working in a dark room, you basically had a finite amount of time, even with a black and white photograph, before the safe light began to affect the actual black and white people. You couldn't work on it forever. The actual safe light was safe, but it wasn't safe forever. It would eventually start to fog the people if you were working with it for too long. So you basically had about 2 minutes before you had to say, okay, fine, I'm moving that down to another step. One of the cautions I have for folks who love to retouch is not, don't retouch, but the thing is that retouching goes through trends. So, what's really fashionable and hip today, you look at it a few years on and it's like, oh, I can't show that picture to anybody because, time is not kind to every retouching I've found. What you should always have is a master file that you can return to, and we'll look at that a bit in terms of organizing image collections. Yeah. So this idea that this started with digital is madness. People used to do a lot of stuff to make things work. So this is a picture that I believe Eugene Smith shot of a lady who had died and people were gathered around her open casket. So up above is one rendering of it. The top one is a rendering of it that's pretty true to the original thing. The bottom one is one that's true to the part that's overexposed, the window, the lady, and so on. And this picture I'm showing you here is the result of a master printer's not merging, because they weren't merging, but they were working the picture through all of the darkroom retardation and extensions that they could do in that 2 to 5 minute time span that they had. And I'll show you what some of that looks like. So this is a markup from a master printer who worked in the Time Life Labs. These guys were doing the pictures that were being published about 50 years ago. So he's marked up the print to say exactly how much extra time he's going to give each one through dodging and burning. And this is a famous picture of James Dean shot by Dennis Stock. And those are his notations for the print. And that's kind of crazy. But the cool thing about it is that today, because there are no limitations, you could take a week and do that. Another Dennis Stock picture of Audrey Hepburn, straight print with the annotations, the final picture. Pablo Inrio, Yeah, he was the master printer from the Time Life Lab. I think he still generates prints from the Time Life Labs for people, for collectors who want images. So that's kind of led to interesting things happening today, particularly with news pictures and some large discussions about that. About 3 years ago, a whole lot of stuff exploded on the WordPress photo because some of the transforms were seen as excessive. Some people were thrown out of the competition and so on. One of the backgrounds to this you should know is that somebody who's shooting on location for a story really can't wait until they get back to file their pictures. That era is gone. They have to file from in the field. So these pictures that I'm going to show you now are transforms that are done by a company in England called 10B. I think it's named after the name of the address of the place that they work from. So 10B has a relationship with photographers where they basically have an intimate understanding of how the photographer wants their work finished. So this would be the straight file from Mika Albert, and this is the picture that would get sent out to agencies. This is Francesco Zizola of Nur. So this is what he shot in the field. That would get sent out to agencies after 10B did its work. I can't pronounce that. Another Nur photographer. And that would be it after done the work. Again, this is not 10B deciding this is what we want it to look like, but them having a long relationship with the photographer and knowing how the photographer wants the work interpreted. Same guy from Nur. Yeah. And you know, I'm not immune to this. There's the Birdman in the savannah. There's a straight shot from a smartphone. There's it after I've done a few things with it. All toning and stuff. I don't move stuff around. Resolution reassignment. Straight out of the camera, an image comes in at 72 dpi. We know this. So that if you're not familiar with this, things that go out for printing need to have a resolution that's reassigned for printing purposes. Different mediums will want different resolution reassignments. So these two pictures, the document is the same size. We haven't changed the pixels. We've just changed how they are assigned for printing purposes. So they will show up smaller at the 300 dpi resolution over here. Resolution resampling. This is when you actually want to make a picture smaller. You can also use this to make pictures bigger, but it never is such a good idea, and the software is guessing at what it's supposed to do, so it can have some really bad outcomes. In this case, we're reducing, so we're going from 35 inches at 72 to, this makes no sense, 20 inches at 72. This would be weird. This is wrong. Need to fix that. Image resizing. Right. So this is when we're making a combination of image reassignment and image resizing, which is actually the most common thing that you have to do. An example is that when I shoot for Newsday, I save a 300 dpi file, but I send them a 200 dpi file that's 10 inches across. It's about a third of the size of what I've shot, but I don't need anything bigger than that. So common image sizes for the web and television, usually 1280 pixels at 72 dpi. For newspapers, large use 12 inches at 200 dpi. Newspapers, headshots, headshot is now to be more than 3 inches. And of course, glassy magazines want all the data. Quick dip into web file formats, different image file formats. JPEG is a lossy format. The more you push that slider down to make it smaller, the more data it throws away. It's usually pretty good up until about 7 or 8. After that, it's not that the picture is going to be destroyed, but what happens is the amount of guessing it has to do when you reopen it can sometimes lead to what's called JPEG artifacts. PNG was meant to be a web version of TIFF. it has some interesting attributes. It does lossless data compression. It supports alpha channels and supports transparency as a result. For some reason, it never took off. I know a lot of graphic designers who use it, but it just never became a file format. Just like JPEG 2000 just died on the vine. GIF was actually a really, really bad image format. It was used a lot for really bad animations in the early days of the web. It's got low bit depth image format. It's got really bad quality. It's very lossy. But it had a little comeback about 6 years ago for what are called motion images, where there'd be a still photo and something in it would be moving. The first of those were made with the best quality GIFs you could get. Now they tend to be made with little movies. Profile formats. TIFF is a lossless professional format. If you apply LZW compression to it will usually reduce the file by about anywhere between 30 to 50%. And that's it. It is not going to reduce it more than that because it does something called token-based compression, which limits the size that it can take it down to. Raw files, which we've discussed before, which I imagine large numbers of people on this discussion are using. That's a camera-specific dump of sensor data. And DNG is open specification from Adobe for packaging that raw data so that more software can open it. I always keep forgetting to fix that sentence. Other file formats, so PSD, PSD, Photoshop native files, they preserve layers, smart objects, and so on. EPS, which tends to be a PDF now. Those are vector formats that save information as instructions. So a bitmap file of a circle has to be a particular size with a drawing of a circle. But an EPS of a circle is just instructions to draw a circle. So it's a really tiny file as a result. Windows bitmap, that was just a bad file. It was actually worse than GIF. Okay, so one of the things that I work with is the idea of master image files and derivative image files. So my master image files are the initial capture, the raw files. My derivative image files are files that I've invested time into. So I have done toning, I've done a little retouching, removed nose hairs, ear hairs, reduce the amount of red in people's eyes and so on. I put some work into it. So I'll want to keep that work. So I'll usually work in either PSD or TIFF format. If I have to put in layers and so on, of course, it'll bounce to PSD. And then I send out for the client 8-bit TIFFs and 8-bit JPEGs. I hold on to 2 files when I'm done. I hold on to the TIFF file, and I hold on to the archive raw file as a DNG file. I toss everything else. I toss the working files, I toss the JPEG files. Occasionally there's a PSD I've done a lot of work with that I'm particularly proud of, less so now because I don't work with layers that much, but you know, different people, different shooting, completely understand. You might want to hold on to your working files with all your layers. That's fine, that's not a problem. Watermarking. So, watermarking is a problematic thing. You are balancing protection with sharing. You want to show people the pictures, you're putting it on the internet. You don't want everybody to run away with it and claim that it's theirs. So ultimately what you're doing is you're calculating a balance between intrusiveness and appreciation. To this day, Photoshop still strips metadata. When you upload a picture to Facebook, sorry, not Photoshop, Facebook. When you upload a picture to Facebook, I think now just the base metadata of the information in the copyright field remains, but it strips everything else out. This is Facebook trying to keep file sizes down on their end, but it's monstrously unfair to photographers. And I balance all that against the fact that, you know, people are going to steal. There's just no way that you can stop people from stealing. So watermarking. So the first time I saw this picture of the old roots, I thought, what happened? And then I realized, no, he doesn't have measles. That's GISL watermarking. And this is, I always cite this as an example of watermarking that destroys a picture. The paper that I do some work for, Newsday, they've had some bad experiences with people taking their pictures. Most recently, The Guardian took one of their pictures and put it on the front page. They put a big watermark on their stuff. Interestingly, The Guardian did not remove the watermark, so they published a Newsday picture with Newsday's watermark on the front page, but that's a whole other story. There comes a point where the watermarking destroys the picture and makes it kind of pointless. I mean, I don't understand what you're doing here. Which is not to say that I don't do it. I photographed this young lady, Athalia Samuel, once, and I said, well, here's the gallery to choose the pictures you want, and I'll process them for you. And it says, you know, images are low resolution files suitable for placement only. Please contact me for full resolution images. This goes straight over the head of models sometimes. Not that Athalia is a dumb girl at all, but she's just excited. I want to show people. So she puts this up on Facebook, and then I have to contact her and say, Athalia, just take it down for me, please. I will send you a proper picture in 15 minutes. So that a big whopping C across the image doesn't necessarily stop people from doing as they please. My own watermarking, so most of my images that go out for review don't have this big C, but they do have this note at the bottom, which most people notice. It evolved from here. This is like 2009. Yeah, that was a while ago. Very straightforward stuff. Then it sort of evolved to something that looks like this. It was like this for a little while. Unobtrusive. You come to my website, please. This was a special case that I did for a web magazine that I shot for a couple of years. And it was a mix of caption, link to them, link to me. Of course, these are not links that people can click, but if somebody is interested, they can find the place if they want to. And yeah, for 3 years, I went to Great Fet because I owed a friend of mine a big favor. And this, I think, was the second to last time that Vibes Cartel performed before he got locked up. And for this one, I did a combination of their logo, my logo. A few hundred of these went up on Facebook, and people were sharing them around and so on. So it was good for both of us at the time. That is dawn on a Sunday morning. And now I'm all the way down to this little thing here, this little LD that I use on Instagram and other places, because at the end of the day, I try to put it in places where, depending on the picture, it's not so easy to remove. But I just want people to know it's mine, and I don't want to make a big fuss about it. So here we are, where we promised that we would get to eventually. Backup principles. So we have this stuff. We've done all this work. Now we'd like to back up. So I always warn people that, you know, there are only two kinds of people. People who have lost data and people who will lose data. And the thing about backup is that people sometimes do a lot of work engineering big, complicated backup plans, but they never test the recovery. They never figure out how long it's going to take or how difficult it's going to be to get the stuff back. I'm a big fan of automating processes. This is what computers are for. I don't use a computer to do more work if I can avoid it. So anything that can be automated, I'm a big fan of that. Media will fail. It just will. There was one time, I think it was about 18 months ago, I went to sleep having worked all night and woke up the next morning, and the drive that I keep all my pictures on was gone, just gone. And I tried it in a couple of cases. I took it out, worked on it, gone, dead, 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 overnight, knock on wood again. Because I had what's called incremental backup, I bought another drive, put it in, and it took about 18 hours to recover the data. Well, to put the data back. But when it was done, it was exactly as it had been before. And that's because when I went to sleep, it was backing up. And it was finished when the drive died. So a lot of this is going to come out, it's going to come over as kind of paranoid and psychotic. And those feelings are your friends, and they should be coupled with an eye towards redundancy. So some things that guide my thinking. I'm the photographer. I'm the photographer. So if you're a professional, there are things that you should be doing that go beyond taking pictures and handing over a CD. One of the things you have to do is, if you're not working for a company that's doing this for you, you're kind of the IT manager for all of this, and you're responsible for data security and handling things and so on. And if you've been shooting for a while, I know professional IT people. When I tell them the scale of what I'm running, they're like, dude, we're running 1/3 of that and we're running a multinational company. I'm like, yeah, but you're dealing with text and PDFs, and I'm dealing with pictures. So you're actually dealing with enterprise scale data sets, and that has its own challenges. So I shape a lot of this thinking around something I call the photographer's promise, which is that as a professional photographer, your first responsibility is to manage client images. It's one of the reasons I don't surrender my copyright, because if you do that, you really have no incentive to do that work. It's not yours again. I always tell people, if you take the copyright from me, I'm going to delete the pictures. I don't care anymore. I can't do anything with it. Your legacy, the thing that you leave behind for your family, is your image database. And it really begins with the workflow and then goes through all these different steps. So, backup rides on effective systems. So at every stage of the photography process, there are what I describe as breakpoints. I believe in creative, uniform, repeatable, predictable processes. I do things the same way all the time, unless something comes up to show me this is a better way, or I could do without this and have the same quality of resource management. Photography is not really about equipment. It's not about your computer. It's not about your screen. It's about the pictures. It's about that master image collection and preserving and handling it. And those archives have to be treated right. They have to be searchable. The images have to be accessible. You need to be able to work with them. If a client or if a need arises or you decide, I want to do this with a picture, you can't be scrambling, looking through a Hiram, Scarum, Hasikara collection of pictures, hoping to find the picture. You need to be able to find it. And that is the result of effective systems. So, my own backup procedures informed by paranoia. I have a tower where all of my pictures tend to reside. That is served by a real-time backup using a piece of software that comes with a Mac called Time Machine. Sorry, this is not a Mac lecture. Time Machine exists. It comes with the OS. I make use of it. So it's a live backup. It's continuously backing up all the time. When I created the PDF to do this presentation, it probably sat down waiting for a little while and then started doing the backup. Next to that is what I call nearline duplicate backups. A nearline backup is one that is not online. That is to say, it's not live on the computer. But in my case, it's just a matter of stretching my hand over to a box here and flipping a switch, and 4 hard drives will pop up on my desktop, and I'll say, okay, fine, those are the pictures that I need to be searching through. Offsite annual backup. It's not actually annual, but whenever I go to my sister, I buy a really big drive and I copy all the pictures to it in the state that they're in, whether they're sorted or not. That just goes, if I'm going to her, if she's coming to visit, I just say, here, hold on to that. If I'm going, she gives me the one from the previous years, and she takes the new one. I do an internet backup to Amazon Glacier. Glacier is the cheapest storage on Amazon. I like Amazon because Amazon has a vested interest in having its data centers run. So they have their own data to protect. Glacier is slow. It's slow to upload, and it's slow to pull down unless you pay an extra fee. I'll explain to you why I use Glacier when I give you a kind of breakout about why I make those choices. Backup to optical media. That's one of those I really know I have to do this. I have the Blu-ray drives, I have the Blu-ray optical media. I just really haven't had the time or energy to sit down and put in all them Blu-ray discs. And finally, whatever you back up, at whatever level, you should always test it to make sure you can recover. It's no good doing all this work, going to sleep feeling nice about yourself and saying, wow, I implemented the most perfect backup scheme. And then when you try to recover the files, you're getting garbage. So I like to think of tiers of backup as money. So live data, that's pictures that just got copied off of a media card, stuff that I've just downloaded to the computer. That's live data. It doesn't exist anywhere else. That's cash in hand, and you're waving it while you're walking through a bad neighborhood. You're looking for links. Transferred to a computer. So that exists in another place. So that's a savings deposit. That's like, okay, it's somewhere safe that I know I could get it and so on, but I don't have to go through a lot of jumps to get to that. First major backup. That's like a credit card or a checking account. You could spend it. You had to do something to spend it. You can't just take the money out your wallet and so on, or just go to hit the ATM and so on. You should think, yeah, I had to write a whole check for that one. Maybe I wouldn't bother. Credit card, I'll find out if people's taking credit cards. It is the amount of time you have to think to get to it. Secondary backup. That's a fixed deposit. That's usually my third backup in this case. That's the one that I go to if for some reason media corruption has caused a problem with the primary and the secondary backup. Cloud and optical backup. That's buying bonds. You should never have to touch it. But you should always be reassured by the fact that it's there. So this is kind of my setup. All these drives are actually inside this computer, so it's not as crazy as it looks. I do most of my primary work on a laptop, but this, I love the old macros. The macros, if you spice them up with enough RAM and a fast SSD and a proper video card, they still perform really well, but you can put 7 drives in them. I don't have an optical drive in it anyway. I don't need an optical drive in there. The Blu-ray is an external. It's connected via FireWire to this backup here. That's 4 4-terabyte drives set up as what's called a JBOD, or just a bunch of disks. And we're going to talk about that versus RAID in a bit. So it's 1 backup of general files, 1 backup of server stuff, and 2 drives that are mirror backup of my pictures that I've sent to first tertiary archive. Those are pictures that I don't usually look for. Those are pictures that I have to spin up the drives and go and look for it. That's actually where the blood bank pictures that I was showing you all, when I needed them to show you them with new apps and so on, I had to go pull that up from deep archive. The paranoia kicks in here because the 2 mirror drives that are serving as my backup for the pictures on those drives are from different manufacturers, because I don't trust anything. I figure if something gone wrong with one factory, it can't go wrong with 2 factories at the same time. I've got software that takes it from here and sends it up to Amazon Web Services. I've got another thing here that basically reads bare drives as if they were floppy disks. Those are for things like the music collection and so on that I just need backed up once and tucked away. And this manual backup system with the optical media, well, that hasn't happened yet, but it will one day. So, the architecture of the backup. There are different ways that you can back up information. The most simple one is synchronization. There are a lot of apps that do straightforward synchronization. Your data is on one drive. You want to synchronize with another drive. You set up the synchronization app and you tell it go. And it makes sure that what is on the primary source drive ends up on the secondary drive. Cloning is a little different. Cloning has, on Windows, it's called ghosting. Cloning is when you make a perfect bootable duplicate of your original drive. So if the whole computer dies, you can completely replicate that computer from a clone. You can just pick up from where you left off. Incremental backups are what Time Machine does. What Time Machine does is you're working, you do stuff, you save stuff, and so on. You stop, you get up, go upstairs to have a bite. While you're doing that and nothing else is going on, Time Machine kicks in and starts saving. It's continuously doing that, just saving all the time. My Time Machine drive is actually in the tower, and the tower is on all the time. So when I go to sleep at night, it just backs up everything. Or if I step away to go have lunch, backs up everything that I've been working on recently. And it doesn't back up every file. It's called incremental because it's only going to back up the stuff that's changed. Rotated, I'm going to show you how that works in a bit. That's when you do a synchronization or a clone, but you rotate the drives that you synchronize or clone to. And deep archiving is when you send stuff to a medium or a data center that is not immediately accessible, but which represents a deep resource of all the stuff that you shot. So this is what that tends to look like. Incremental or synchronized is just two drives. So you've got two drives going on here. They synchronize from here to here. So whatever's here is replicated here. Mirrored and rotated, whatever's here ends up here, and then this drive here is mirrored with this drive. Rotated, a rotation syndrome usually involves anywhere between 3 and 4 different drives. Some people do them by the week, and this drive gets changed every week. So it means that if this dies and this dies, this is never going to be more than a week away. If you're really worried about your data, you should do this daily. Some people do this at their office and rotate this drive and take it home with them. Final one here is synchronize here. So this becomes your first primary backup. Mirrored, and then going to a DVD or Blu-ray, going to your cloud services. So you've seen enough pictures of things on a Mac. I'll show you some screenshots of tools on Windows. Minitool Shadow Maker is the best one that I found based on reviews. I don't have a PC to test it with right now. But it does both cloning and synchronization, and it does that shadow cloning as well. Always sync. This is a synchronization tool, and you can decide on the directions that it will back up. One of the things about synchronization tools is that you can have it always write new stuff, or you can have it keep the source computer and the backup drive in complete synchronization. So it will actually delete stuff that you delete from the source drive. That sounds like a nightmarish thing to do, but for some people it might make sense. This is Acronis. This is kind of the gold standard of Windows backup. The full Acronis True Image system does almost all the things that I've discussed there. Paragon is a competitor. They have a decent system as well. So I mentioned JBOD, and RAID is a thing. I once used RAID for my Time Machine backup, which was kind of like doing acrobatics above a safety net made of toilet paper. But I did. Somebody joined in late, boy. Dude, I'm nearly done. So RAID was originally designed for two things. Either speed and capacity, where you joined two drives together, and it became twice as fast because it was writing the data to two separate drives. And there was fast RAID, so it was striping to two of them. So it was done for speed, or it was done for capacity. It would bind the two drives into one, So two 1 terabyte drives would appear as one 2 terabyte drive. Or it was done for redundancy, which is mirroring. The problem with RAID for me is that there's not really a uniform standard in either hardware or software. Let me explain what that means. There are hardware RAID boxes. So you buy a hardware box, you put your drives in it, you set it up, you're going. It's fine. If the box fails, not the drive, not a drive. RAIDs are designed for one or not two. You need at least a 5 drive RAID for 2 to fail. But if one drive fails, it writes what's called parity data across all the other drives. So you have to do then what's known as the RAID rebuild. And hardware boxes do this automatically. You basically put in a new drive and you just leave it alone for a day or two. And it just rebuilds the data from the parity data. But if the box fails, you can't take, in most cases, those drives from that box and put it in another box from another manufacturer and it works. You have to put it in an identical box. The most extreme case of this is Drobo, who make a really sleek, sexy interpretation of RAID. But if the RAID box fails on a Drobo, you can do nothing until you get a replacement box, which is not a great solution for down here. RAID was great when data storage was really expensive. I find JBOD, which stands for just a bunch of disks. RAID used to stand for redundant array of independent drives. So JBOD was like a snarky rebuttal to it. Now that you can buy 8 and 12 terabyte drives on the cheap, well, not cheap, but okay, this is where it sounds weird, but the 12 terabyte drive that I bought for my Time Machine backup cost me the same amount of money as a 120 megabyte drive did in 1992. So my idea of cheap is based on a whole different experience with the cost of media. JBOD is a little fussy. If you want it to work really well, you have to make a lot of careful use of software. But once you've got it set up, you can do that mirroring almost automatically. And it works pretty well. So destinations, places where your backup is going to go. Hard drives, either RAID or JBOD. Flash drives, well, you got to be working with really tiny data to consider a flash drive. Optical media, cloud storage services. Just as a side, excuse me, these are diagrams of 2 of the more popular RAIDs. RAID 0, this one and this 2, that's usually set up for speed. And now that we have SSDs, there are a lot fewer RAIDs being set up for speed. And RAID 10, which is designed for both speed and redundancy, but is so incredibly complicated to set up that you really need an IT person to do that for you. This is ARC, ARQ. ARC is my tool of choice for backing up to Amazon Glacier. There's some fussy stuff that you have to plug into it that you get from Amazon when you sign up for it. It's available for both Windows and Mac, and it doesn't only back up to Amazon. It backs up to Dropbox, the Box, to pretty much everything that has a storage service. But it works really well, and it also does incremental backup if you need it to. A popular one that people use is Backblaze. Backblaze is kind of wild. If you like wildness in your life, then they're kind of an interesting company to have to deal with. They have some nice software. This is a Windows version. There's also a Mac version. You basically tell it how much data you want to pump up to it, and you plug it in, and you tell it when the backup is going to run, and it just runs until everything is backed up, and then it tops up from there. When I did my first ARC backup to Amazon, I think I had a 10 megabit connection upwards then, and it took about 2 months to finish the backup. It doesn't do anything while you're actively working on the computer. So it was mainly doing it either when I wasn't there or overnight. But then again, Glacier is slow. Backblaze is much faster. So when we talk about backup, industrial complex backup, this is a Backblaze pod. Backblaze created these things. This is a thing of their own engineering. And it's basically a computer that handles a vast array of drives. You'll see similar things in Google's data centers and Apple's data centers. The only difference between Google and Apple is that Backblaze is wild. So they show everybody what they're doing. They don't care. I think they put the plans for it online as well. And that's what a Backblaze data center looks like. That's what those pods look like. So that's what backup looks like when it's taken to another level. So that's kind of the end of the blather. Everybody's been really quiet and respectful. I appreciate that. Now I'm here sitting down waiting for questions that I probably hope, well, I really do hope that I can answer. And if I can't, I won't bluster because you can't fool with people. So, any questions?
Hey Mark, Chad here.
Hello, Chad there.
When you were saying the files that you kept, so once you create the DNG and the TIFF, you will throw away the raw file.
Yeah, toss it.
And the JPEG. So the only thing you'll have backed up really is the TIFF and the DNG.
The TIFF and the DNG, yes.
Okay, cool. You also spoke a bit about the verification software.
Mm-hmm.
You use that in your workflow as well when you're doing your things, or you think that's an extra layer that, I mean, if you have really big, I mean, is it something you recommend using in a workflow?
Again, it's how much time you've got to set aside for it. Image verifiers take a while. If I were copying something from a drive that was wonky to a new drive, I'd probably run image verification over everything that I managed to get off it. If that happened, knock wood again. I wouldn't trust the copy job coming from a drive that was failing. So I would run, there's a tool called Image Verifier that I had tested once. I think there are other tools. Most of these tools are kind of enterprise class things that are available for Windows and so on. But you see, this is a weird part of the business. Huh? People don't really get into this end of it. They don't really worry about it because they're busy taking new pictures. So as a consequence, the market is relatively small. So people tend to construct their business approach to enterprises, to museums, to libraries, to people who are managing big data, advertising agencies, big assets that they need to control and so on. And we've lost out a lot on that. And so it's, you know, it's just as the way it is. You're not suddenly going to get a whole bunch of photographers going like, I need to think about my backup regime. No, it doesn't really happen. People think about that, you know, when they've lost a whole hard drive of pictures, and then they start thinking about what it costs to go to drive savers to recover it. And then they get the price and they realize maybe I could live without pictures. It's a long, sad story. I handle the paranoia from the early end of it. And I'll tell you this is not because I'm some sort of sainted person who got backup early on as a religion. I have had painful experiences with losing stuff. I know all the stuff that I've lost to failed drives. I remember there was one time I bought a 750 megabyte drive and copied everything over to it. And it ran just long enough for me to wipe and sell the old drive before it failed. Everything gone. So I became a bit of an evangelist because I had been a sinner. So that's why I prepare all these slides and spend all this time talking about this to anybody who cares. Because, you know, I've been punished for my sins, man. I don't want anybody else to have to go through that.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I've lost stuff in the past too, so yeah, I'm trying to get to where I need to be, but I don't think I'm there yet. Great presentation, very informative, and filled in a few gaps for me. So thank you.
Cool. I'll probably do a PDF for the slides for anybody who wants it. Maybe I could harvest the names of people who want to get it and the email addresses, and I'll just send it to you all to send along to them. Or they could contact me directly. I mean, I'm
Mark,
not a secret. Yes, Christine, how can I help?
Yeah. Well, you know, we are dealing with my father's very large 50-year database, so somewhat in the vein of what the kind of work that you've been doing for all these years. And up till now, we've been using, just like you described, a series of hard drives, 6 TB, 12, 4, various things. I worry a lot about it. I have to tell you, I worry a lot about it because I think that it's certainly not adequate. I don't know that we have some duplicates of some of it, but it keeps growing and growing and growing and growing because as you scan, you know, it doesn't stop. So you could buy and buy and buy and buy. And so we're in the midst of trying to figure out, so what is the right solution for it? And we had discussed RED, or I have been talking to people and they told me about a RED system, the Synology system. I listened to your discussion now and it confuses me because you talk about JPod, but then the JPod is describing, if I understood it correctly, a combination of a number of drives that are cheaper, but can still do the trick. Can you say something about, a little bit more about that? How do you make the decision between the two, especially in our case? And I don't know, other people may face that down the road, other photographers. Thanks.
All right, so JBOD is, it stands for just a bunch of disks, so it's JBOD. It's really a way of thinking about data and data recovery and data management around large data sets. So what we're talking about here is, let me see here. All right, so this is what I do here. So these 4 independent drives here are in this box. This is actually a RAID box. Most RAID boxes can be set, they have a JBOD setting. So I have it set so that 4 drives show up on my desktop. But I know what each of those 4 drives is for. There's going to come a point when 4 terabytes is not going to do what I need to do. At that point, in fact, I'm pretty sure I'm there now. When I start moving stuff off the tower, it's probably going to need to bounce up to 8 terabytes by 2. I basically have 2 sets of pictures that I'm working with. Pictures that are in archive mode and pictures that are in live practice mode. Pictures that are in live, regardless of which they are, they need to be in 2 places. At least 2 places. So on my computer, there is a drive that has the work that I'm doing and work that I'm referring to and work that I don't consider complete and ready. And some work that is actually complete, and I'm hoping at some point I find the time to just organize it and put it away. When it gets put away to that. Don't get tied up with JBOD. JBOD is just a way of thinking about it. Think of it as nearline storage. Nearline is storage that you can bring online and take offline when you don't need it anymore. So that nearline storage is within reach. You can pick it up and connect it to the computer. In my case, it's always connected to computer. It's just off. So that nearline storage becomes the new place where that lives, and it lives in 2 places in that nearline storage. So that on the tower, while it's active, there's a version that's on the hard drive that I'm working on, and an invisible version that is in the time machine backup. Now, I don't work with the time machine backup. That doesn't appear like a drive that you can access, but I can restore from it if I need to. So that's 1 copy that is in 2 places. Another set of work is on the nearline backup, which is also in 2 places. So that is my first tier of backup. My next tier of backup after that is the drive that goes to my sister in Houston. So everything that I consider to be complete goes to my sister in Houston, and that backup exists there. Everything that is on the tower and on the nearline backup also goes to Amazon using Arc. So that is the deep storage, and the third place that it exists with my immediate access. I can access stuff from Amazon Web Services, but I don't really plan to have to do that as an ongoing thing. That is an emergency. That is, oh my goodness, everything is lost and all is that, and I need to pull this data down right now. So if you have your stuff on multiple drives, that's fine. Label the drives, you know what's on it, and so on. That's actually an excellent use case for a catalog, because a catalog will tell you, you can browse the catalog, and when you click on the picture, it says, insert drive Norton Carnival 2. And you just connect it, and it will take you straight to the pictures. But every single one of those drives that you have pictures on has to have a backup as well. It can't be just one drive with the pictures on it. You have to have 2 versions of that drive, identical versions, which is why synchronization tools are useful. You have one copy of it, you connect 2 drives, you say, okay, this is my master, this is going to be the copy, and you run the synchronization, and you take the copy and you put it somewhere else entirely. Because some of backup is duplicating, and some of backup is geography. The reason why I send stuff to Amazon Web Services, once it goes to Amazon Web Services, it's not going to one place, it's going to multiple, sorry, it's going to multiple storage systems that they have running for their data. My stuff needs to be in multiple places physically, not just on separate instances of media, but on separate instances of media that are physically separate from each other. And by physically separate, I mean not different places of the same house. I mean different houses, preferably different islands or different countries. That's the paranoia part. So if your collection of pictures is on a set of drives, that's fine, but it can't only be on that set of drives. It's got to be on that set of drives and on a duplicate of that set of drives. Things like Synology are what are called network accessible storage. They're a nice solution for many purposes, but they're really designed to create a server environment for a very digitally active household. So they're great for storing pictures, they're great for storing music, they're great for storing movies. Everybody can access it, it's wonderful. The really high-end NAS, they're called NASs, N-A-S, NAS. NAS storage systems are really quite good. They're good pieces of engineering, they're fast, they're powerful things. They're like standalone computers. You plug them in, you format them, you set them up, you locate them on the network. They usually come with software. You say back up everything to the NAS. Some people will have a NAS that people can access outside of the home, outside of the country. So they're great tools, but they're generally not set up for massive quantities of storage. That's server grade stuff you're talking about there. That's why people build boxes with 24 drives in them. They're not set up usually for extensive image accessing, and they depend very heavily on the quality of the network that they're connected in. So many of them are set up for wireless, though you can use them on Ethernet. All my systems run on Ethernet. And they're all wireless capable. And if I go upstairs to watch TV and I take the laptop with me, sure, it'll be on wireless then. But sitting here at the desk, it's connected to fast Ethernet. When I access a file that's on my tower, which is really the image workstation, it's making an Ethernet connection, and it's like if it was connected directly to the computer. So I don't know if that helps your thinking, But I think the critical intervention that I'd like to suggest here is that if you have a collection of hard drives with your father's work on it, then you should have a clear idea of what is on those hard drives and be able to say, okay, this is on this hard drive, this is on that hard drive, which is what catalog tools are good for. And you must have a duplicate, a bit for bit duplicate of what is on that hard drive on a secondary hard drive. That would be your first tier of backup.
Understood. Yeah, and so then it's probably wise in our case as well to have this a first tier and a second tier, and something that's out of the country altogether.
For your father's work, your father deserves at least 4 tiers.
Oh, but, okay. Yeah, well,
I'm not kidding.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. So, okay, thank you so much. I don't want to take more time.
That's cool. Anybody else?
Can I just say something? When your drive starts to fail is not the time to try to back up, because the act then will make your drive fail even faster. It has a limited amount of life on it, so back up before your drive starts to fail.
Backing up should be an ongoing thing. My reference to chat about that was that if for some reason I had to copy something off of a failing drive that existed nowhere else, that I would not trust the copy and I would verify it. But yeah, my standard thinking about data is that it needs to be in 3 places minimum. My first step, if something fails, is not to try to recover from the drive. It's to go to the backup and restore. Any questions?
And there were some questions in the chat. I'm not sure if you're seeing it.
I am probably not seeing the chat. Again, this is me, the dodo head.
Hey Mark, chat here again.
Yes? Your chat.
You talk about the testing the recovery. So I mean, like I back up on some, right now I have some WD drives, and I use that software. And I have some of that software. You could recover, you could test the recovery on the recovery. When you test the recovery, what it does, it just pulls down the download, the backup onto your computer.
Testing recovery is always a small scale version of what you'd have to do if you were in a panic. I usually pick a couple of files at random, pull them down, test the integrity.
Okay, so you just pull a few files. It's not the whole
thing. No. The whole thing. You pay money for that.
Right. Okay. All right. Good.
Yeah. I'll do a random test of online. Brian is asking about focus. What about focus? Oh, I never saw all of this. Well, I hope you all answered each other's questions. Focus. Focus is Hasselblad's thing. Yeah. If you have a Hasselblad, then that's what you should be using. Especially if, I don't know if the current Hasselblads still have the options to shoot to DNG. Yeah. Brian and Rory will have their Hasselblad talk. That's not for PWATs like me. All right. How do you search keywords in Lightroom? Use the text function. In Lightroom, there's across the top, it's attributes, different attributes, metadata, and there's a text function. You just type what you're looking for inside it. Anybody else miss there? Anybody with a raise hand button? Did anybody raise a hand? I didn't see any hands get raised. I'm reading the chat.
I did, Mark.
Yes.
Mark, Nadine here. I raised my hand, but you just answered my question about the
Yeah, I'm reading now, so I'm just looking at it here, trying to catch up with anything that is. Been on the fence to try Affinity. Yeah, the price. I see no reason why you shouldn't try it. It may be that your specific configuration of computer may work very well with it. I think the PC version of it is faster than the Mac version. But Media Pro was discontinued by phase 1. So you can't buy it. I saw when I was checking the update to Capture One, I saw that I could still get a download of it by Res. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the fate of a lot of these things. Catalog software in particular. Anything that Carbon Copy Cloner. I use Carbon Copy Cloner, but I was staying away from stuff that was Mac only, especially for things like cloning and so on. 3-step map as a PDF of the whole shotgun summary. Dude, I am doing that. That's why I get a PDF for the whole thing. Format to shoot, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Jalal, really looking for a coaching. Okay. All right. All right, so I think I ran through all the questions here. I think I must have missed a couple. That's tragic, though. There was once a company called Ant0 who created this absolutely beautiful catalog tool. Absolutely beautiful. It worked fairly well, but it was an early product. But gorgeous, gorgeous thing. I actually took it out of my presentation because I really just had it there for the sentiment of it. I think it took them about 8 months to fail because nobody was buying it. They'd go like, "What is this for?" And then they'd go like, "I don't care about that." Nobody was buying it. All right. So join the computer audio button. So is that it for everyone? Have I met everyone's questions?
Mark, accept mine again. Do you do consultancies? I'm serious.
No, I can't make. I give advice freely to anybody who asks, but I just ain't got time.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, but you know, people who ask questions, I mean, I did this. I was preparing for this for like 3 days because I had something, but you know, it's like screenshots were out of date, new tools had come along, some tools had just disappeared entirely. Yeah, so it's kind of problematic. If you haven't been using a browser in your workflow, though, as a prelude to loading into a parametric image editor, a good place to start is actually Bridge. If you're, of course, subscribing to Photoshop, then you probably already have Bridge. If you're like me and you're still using CS6, that's what those pings were. Yeah, and you're using an old version of Bridge, you can get a newer copy of Bridge for free, which is kind of useful. Yeah, okay.
Hi, Giles here.
Yes?
I am an Amazon Prime user, and they have an unlimited free backup, including raw files. Is that different to Glacier? Is that the same thing? I'm not familiar with
they say unlimited, but when you start whacking it with serious data, they start getting freaky. They're really hoping for mom and pops with that. I've got terabytes of stuff up there. They kind of start going like, your needs are different. They may have changed their tune, but I rather doubt it. I actually started backing up to it and it freaked. It freaked, which is why I switched to Glacier. The regular Amazon Web Services for upload and download are really targeting people who do software and need to distribute it on the web. So a lot of the tools you'll buy that are offered as downloads, after you pay money and so on, and they send you the link, you usually find it's coming down from Amazon Web Services. But that is pricier. Glacier is cheaper, but slower. Sorry, you just have to have patience with it. But you know, try Prime and see what happens with it. In my case, when I tried it, they freaked. They were like, no, this is not for that. But they may have changed. I mean, that was then, this is now.
Mark, what about Dropbox?
I have a pro Dropbox account. Is that me or somebody else? No? Am I tackling?
That's
Yeah,
some weird feedback echo of you, but I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, I have a professional Dropbox account. Dropbox is not for this. To do the kind of backing up that I would need to do to Dropbox, it would take long and cost too much. What I use Dropbox for is circulating stuff. So if I teach a class at UE, and for about 5 years I couldn't get into the electronic system. So so I just packaged all this stuff on Dropbox and said, hey, look the link. Of course, the events of the last 3 weeks have meant that all the things that were offering me challenges suddenly went away. So now I'm able to use their systems again. But the other problem with Dropbox is that even as a tool for distributing like images to clients, the IT departments claim that it's insecure. And I have at least 4 clients who block it. They just don't allow people to use it. I think part of the reason is they're afraid that it's too easy to drag company information into Dropbox very quietly. But a lot of companies have banned its use. So I've had to go with other distribution methods. I use a tool out of a web app out of Germany called Picter, P-I-C-T-E-R, to distribute images. That's been in rapid development. It is a pretty strong tool. And it's not blocked because it's not really a upload, download thing. It's really a go look at the pictures, go download the pictures kind of tool. So far, I have not too many problems with clients going like, no, you're making our systems insecure. So yeah. Any other questions? I don't have brilliant things to add to this discussion without some prompting. If anybody's being shy, they can just talk, it's fine. Are we still there? See who's still there? Simon. Yeah, Rory's still there. Quiet.
Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Dahlia. All right, cool, man. Just want to know what are your thoughts about COVID, and if any of these companies may go out or have a crash or anything like that? That's risk management in terms of storage and backup. That's your worst case scenario thought. Thanks.
Well, as long as people keep paying their bills, I don't imagine it's going to be a large risk for many of them. Backblaze does a kind of quick and dirty thing so that their costs are not the same costs that Dropbox or Amazon have, or even Google for that matter. In fact, it may well prove to be a boon for them because when you have to move a lot of information around digitally, there's often circumstances in which it has to be completely asynchronous. You put something somewhere for people to access when they're good and ready. And things like Dropbox and web services like that are very useful for asynchronous learning stuff. I think that big challenge is going to be the challenge that Zoom faced almost immediately, which is that something that's insecure for 10 million people is not something that can be insecure for 200 million people. The buzz that surrounds it becomes a whole other level of glamorous. So Zoom had the same insecurities 6 months ago, but there were only 10 million people using it, and only the highest security companies were going like, oh, no, this is buggy, you can't use it. But when it's 200 million people and the entire school system of whole states begin using it, and they begin to realize the risks of it, and then those risks become amplified by people running naked through chats and so on, so to speak, then people start to get worried and nervous. I'm actually working on a story for next week's column about 2 Trinis, one of whom is my sister and another is a good friend, who teach remotely. My sister's been teaching for 7 years, and the other person just started. I mean, she's like, I have to teach, I can't go to school. So and their respective experiences with it. And that situation is evolving almost daily in the States. The companies that are probably going to thrive are the ones that take digital security seriously. The Zoom people have started making a lot of talk, having a lot of talk about what they're doing to make things more secure. But their stuff was so sloppy for so long that they have a long road towards winning back that trust. So that's problematic for them. Dropbox already had its own problems with security. That's also something they're going to have to address. But I think there's definitely a role for online web services, asset services, for handling the kind of data that needs to get slung around. And remember, most of us are finishing or just about the plan starting to teach. So when this thing hit really hard, people who were ending a semester or a term, and just now they're going to try to start a term. What's going to happen then is it's going to spin up, I think, in about 3 weeks in a whole different way, because people are then going to have expectations. When everybody was using Zoom on zooming around, as it were, it was like, this is an answer to my problem, I'm going to use it. Now it's going to be, is this the right answer to my problem? Is it secure? Can I use it? And the companies that answer that question in a decisive kind of way, sorry, I think are going to thrive. So that's going to be interesting.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate it. Just to say a quick summary, what a question I had was that for someone who's going to look at the PDF or come in to read your document, it's a quick, like, these are the 3 steps of what my presentation is about. And these are the sort of tools you could use in each step. So as either a new photographer or old photographer, they say, hey, when I'm shooting, this is the format I need to be in. This is the processing template I should be working in to format my database. And then the last thing, how do I store my database? And these are the options for storage. Thank you so much. And have a good evening. Thanks. Great work.
I'll consider it. Cool. Crash plan. A good friend of mine who is an Apple genius in Tennessee, who was a graphic designer in Trinidad, loves Crash plan. For various reasons, it didn't sing to me. I think that $10 per month unlimited had some limitations that I was finding problematic. There was something to do with Crash plan when I was making a decision about where to store data. I can't remember what it was now, but there was some deal breaker to it. I really honestly cannot remember what it was now. For my friend who is storing, I think, 1 or 2 terabytes of data up there of artwork and so on, it was fine for him. I mean, there's no reason not to explore it. Most of these things, I think, have trials that give you a sense of how the system works before you commit to uploading big data and starting to spend money. So I would explore the trials. I mean, my big thing to people is, when it comes to apps, try the app, try the trial version, work with it for the duration of time that it's available to you. See if it fits you, because one of the things I didn't want to do is tell people, do it this way. Because what is one person's comfortable glove is another person's iron helmet. You want to pick the thing that kind of makes sense for you and it really is comfortable. I don't know what to do with a raised hand, Christine, so just talk.
Okay, so I just have one more question, and that is, in terms of the actual make drives that you buy, Western Digital, Lassie, those are some of the common ones. But in your experience, is there a higher quality one than the other?
Lassie doesn't make drives. Lassie makes cases. When you open up a Lassie, it's going to be the cheapest drive that they could get. I used to love Lassie drives. They're pretty, absolutely gorgeous things. But really, after you take them to the prom, you don't want to take them home to mom. I gave up on the C drives in favor of I get drive boxes. Well, this is a Mac thing. So I get drive boxes from a company called Otherworld Computing, and I buy drives either from them or from other vendors. There are basically two kinds of drives that you can buy. There are enterprise drives, which are meant for servers that are running for long periods of time. And there are what I call OEM drives that are meant to be put into a computer when it's being constructed. Backblaze, again, wild company, but they're kind of appealing to the way they approach things, has done some reports on their experience with drives, and they say there's like no difference between enterprise drives and regular drives. The drive is going to fail, so they just buy the cheapest drives because they're going with bulk. If a drive fails in a Backblaze array, it automatically rolls over to another drive. They have multiple instances of the data in various places, so that they are doing this on numbers. They have a lot of drives, a lot of capacity, and a really incredible capacity to roll that data over to other instances. You don't, so it's kind of hard to say exactly which drive you should buy right now. There was a time that Western Digital was the wet toilet paper of hard drives. They were really bad. I don't think that's the case anymore, but after that experience with them, I never bought another one. I've tended, for me personally, to bounce between Hitachi and Seagate. Hitachi is the drive business that IBM used to own. They sold it out to Hitachi. They sold their computer making business to Lenovo, and they sold their drive capacity making business to Hitachi. So I tend to bounce between Hitachi and Seagate. But I'll sometimes, if I'm going to buy a drive, I'll do a quick scan on drive reliability to see who's showing up as a drive that's holding up its own. Toshibas tend to be kind of middle of the road. Some of the better Western Digital drives, I think the Western Digital Black Series, are supposed to be good. But the thing is, a lot of these things are about mechanics, the quality of construction. None of them is made to last. I mean, they're made to run for a while. They say they're 10,000, 500,000 hours, whatever. But they're going to fail. The only thing that you can bank on is the length of time they're going to run before they fail. And for that reason, I don't make a big distinction about what I'm going to buy in terms of a drive. I'll buy on capacity. I'll never buy the cheapest drive that's available because there's a good chance it's refurbished. Technically, a refurbished drive should be better because it went through the process twice, but really, I'm not going to buy a refurbished drive. So I couldn't say which drive you should buy. I can tell you that I do bounce between, for my redundancy, if I'm copying two things to two separate drives, I'm going to buy a Hitachi and a Seagate. The problem with things like the C drives is that you never know what's in it. But the one thing you can be assured of is the cheapest drive they could buy when they were manufacturing the box. Because that's how they make money. They make a pretty box and they put a cheap drive in it, and yeah. Rory, have you investigated Amazon Glacier? Is it something that you need to access often, or you just want a place to put your stuff so it's safe? Because Glacier is not, sorry, Christine, I'm just answering something here that Rory put up there. Glacier is not a kitchen cupboard. You don't want to be taking mugs out of it all the time.
Alive, eating right now.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Glacier is really the place where you put your Christmas tree. You don't go there, you don't want people to see it, but it's there all the time, and you know the Christmas tree is safe for when you need it next year. So it depends on kind of what you need. For me, the service that I wanted was something that was there if I needed it, but I'm going to try my damnedest not to have to need it. But if you're going back and forth with the data, CrashPlan or Blackblaze are probably going to be a better bet. But I don't like cloud for that at all. I don't like cloud for accessing information like that at all. Don't trust it. And it's too dependent on what the internet is like that day when you need your stuff. So I don't know if you answer your question there, Christine, which is, I just took a whole side thing
Yes,
to
yes.
talk to her.
I've answered my question, and all the other information you shared is also very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of drives, know which drive you're buying. LaCie doesn't manufacture drives. A lot of the pretty case manufacturers don't manufacture their drives. They're providing cases for the cheapest drive they can find. Yeah, so that would be that solution there. Any other question?
Yeah, can I just say something about drives? A while ago, a long time ago, Google had done that same experiment. They had tested all the available drives on the market to see which ones they should be using. And what they found is that they could not use only one brand of drive. Because what tends to happen with hard drive technology is they will invent a new technology and it will be new and untested. Then that technology will start to mature until it gets to its limit, and then they will jump to something new again. The mature technology drives would tend to be more stable. The new advanced drives would tend to have unforeseen flaws. And if they put all their eggs in one basket, you would tend to have disastrous crashes if you have all the same drive. So what they do is they deliberately mix a batch of all different sorts of drives so they'll never have the same sort of accident happening to all their drives at the same time.
Paranoia. What I'll say is that I think this was after the big flood when they had the Ring of Fire earthquake. Thailand was a place that manufactured, they had a lot of drive factories there. And for about 6 months, the quality of drives coming out of there was really iffy. And that's just one of those things that, you only find out after the fact. Like, wait, they make the drives in Thailand, but when they flooded out, what happened with this and so on? And there was an increasing rash of failures with that because of just that thing that happened that totally disrupted a very careful machine workflow. So things like that happen. And yeah, I love SSDs, for instance, for working, but we don't trust them. I trust them even less than I trust spinning hard drives. So everything gets backed up all the time. Paranoia. Reprice it, but okay, fair enough. If you're using Glacier, buy Arc, because Glacier is one of Amazon's developer-facing products. It's not really a product that they make for casual users. Getting into it is difficult, but Arc does a good job of making it easy because they basically say, get this information from Amazon, this information from Amazon, this information around, plug it in here, 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 and here, and start a backup. It's a very elegant way of dealing with it. So, if we good, I will say good night. Is anybody shy who's planning to talk? Okay. Good night, Simon.
Hey, Mark. Well, on behalf of the Photographic Society and the Photographers Guild, thank you for a really great presentation. I think those people who signed up and didn't show up really missed out. Thanks for, I know you said you did a couple of days work on it. I know, things are really crazy right now, so we appreciate that. I think we had a really good discussion on a few different topics, and I like that you did the whole workflow thing before you got into the backup, because I think that is really important to kind of set the stage for the backup side of it. So thank you very much. We look forward to getting the PDF version of it so we can distribute to the people. And have a good night. And everyone, thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying for the whole thing. And
good questions.
Good questions. Good questions. And also, yeah, so just be safe and stay home and all that good stuff. Wash your hands. All right. Thank you very much.
For a challenge on Saturday.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
good night.
cool. I wash my hands of all of you. Good night.
Night, Mark.
All right.
Night, Mark. Thank you.